what Japan lacks, they're very enthusiastic that this bilateral relations could expand. But what it seems to be lacking is more broad vision on how Japan should face South Asia as a region. Japan wants to sell Shimeiwa's US-2 amphibious aircrafts. Japan wants to sell a nuclear reactor to India. We could cooperate more on maritime security to hedge against China, right? And many are very much enthusiastic. And Japan concluded bilateral FTA, free trade agreement with India back in 2011. And by updating those agreements, Japan-India economic ties could expand and more investment is expected. Social security agreement has been signed. And anyway, but it's just Japan and India. And I think there's a lack of perspective on how that would reflect from, say, Pakistan's perspective, or how Japan should engage other South Asian countries. And actually, Prime Minister Abe is visiting Bangladesh and Sri Lanka later this year. And hopefully, something of a regional vision, Japanese version, vis-a-vis South Asia could come out through those visits.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the question. Good to see you again. On the Pakistan question, that's a very interesting question about if India were to proceed. As I understand it, the Indians would like to do missile defense themselves, this indigenization. So I don't not studied this or thought about this in great depth, but my immediate response would be, in Pakistan's case, given the tools to hand for Pakistan in its dispute with India, and given the tools for India in its dispute with Pakistan, it would be hard to see missile defense having any great impact anytime soon. Because after all, to some extent, since both countries have gone nuclear, weaponized, from my vantage point, they've essentially played an insurgency game, either in Afghanistan or in on the border or in Kashmir. And that can be the fire under the stove, as it were. The fire on the stove can be turned up or down on that, depending on the tactics of their relationships, is my guess. So whether missile defense would fundamentally, if you will, to use the term in strategic theory about disruptive, not sure. So it's kind of my thought on that specific question. On the question of trilateral lessons, it's interesting. I have given some thought to this. Now, it's tricky because in the other trilaterals that are meaningful and substantive, two of the partners are allies with the United States. And this is not the case with US, India, Japan. The second issue is that it is quite true that Japan and Korea are not allies. And it's quite true, obviously, that legally neither Canberra or Tokyo are allies. But it's fair to say that their weapons acquisition profile, their exercise profile, their habits of cooperation profile are far more similar than the Indian system and the Japanese system. And there are some lessons one wouldn't want to take from others. We can always learn from others, but there are things we should also learn not from others. So I think that my own sense is that US, Japan, India would have very much its own dynamics. But absent this ability to bridge the chasm between Indian insistence on autonomy and Japanese insistence on strategic autonomy within an alliance structure. And by the way, within the US, we have to learn to have some more space within the alliance. This is my view. I'm not an official, so no one cares what I say. But I mean, I think we're adjusting to an alliance where we're going to be doing things with a larger, borders are going to go out more in the alliance. It's just the nature of the beast. We're not fighting the Cold War anymore. So that's what I think about borrowing from trilaterals.